welcome back to our channel. A rare dime most people overlook, could you be holding one? Like and subscribe to learn the key signs to look for. In the quiet hum of machinery that defined the early 1970s U.S. mint operations, nestled among hundreds of thousands of coins struck daily, a subtle anomaly took form. A small, seemingly inconsequential detail emerged unnoticed by the mint workers of the time. The year was 1970, a year defined by shifting politics, a society in flux, and a numismatic world largely unaware of the treasure it was about to spawn. The dime, ordinary, everyday currency, was being produced in vast quantities, minted at facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Yet, in this ocean of commonality, something rare had been born, hiding in plain sight, masked by the clatter of metal and the routine of industrial repetition. The Roosevelt dime, introduced in 1946, had long been a fixture in American pockets. By 1970, the coin's design was a familiar one, the late president's profile facing left, inscriptions framing his image, and the reverse bearing a torch flanked by olive and oak branches. Minted in a composition of copper and nickel after the transition away from silver in 1965, these coins were largely ignored by collectors focused on more glamorous pieces. But among the countless examples produced in 1970, there existed a subtle variation, an error so discreet that even seasoned experts initially overlooked it. It would take years before the magnitude of this error would ripple through the collecting community. At first, no one noticed anything out of the ordinary. Rolls of dimes were dispersed to banks, change drawers, and vending machines. But somewhere, a coin began its journey, not toward commerce, but toward discovery. Tucked within a roll of proof coins sold directly from the U.S. Mint, an unsuspecting collector, decades later, began the meticulous task of evaluating what appeared to be standard proofs. The coins, with their mirror-like surfaces and sharp details, were the epitome of mint craftsmanship. Proof sets from the 1970s weren't unusual. They were, in fact, quite popular among hobbyists, sold in protective packaging and often left untouched for years. It was a quiet evening when the collector, known only as Michael to his numismatic peers, sat in his small home office, flipping through his older acquisitions. The lighting was dim but adequate, and the air carried the subtle scent of old paper and coin albums. His 1970 proof set wasn't new to him. It had sat in a drawer for over a decade, largely ignored due to its common nature. But something caught his eye, something that didn't align with his memory of the set. As he removed the dime from its cellophane wrapping, he noticed the reverse design didn't quite match the usual precision. Turning it over in his gloved hand, he saw something he couldn't immediately place. The shape of the lettering, the positioning of certain elements, it seemed off. Yet it wasn't a typical wear issue or damage. This was something different, something intriguing. He fetched his magnifying loupe, adjusting it carefully over his eye, and examined the coin again. That's when he saw it. The design wasn't from 1970. It wasn't even supposed to be there. The coin bore a reverse intended for a 1968 dime. The realization didn't strike all at once. At first, Michael thought it might be a trick of the light, a result of dye fatigue, or perhaps just a misaligned strike. But as he cross-referenced the coin with his library of design evolution charts, he confirmed his suspicion: the coin had been struck using a die from an earlier year. And not just any die, it appeared to be a leftover proof die from 1968, mistakenly used during the production of the 1970 proof sets at the San Francisco Mint. This wasn't simply a misprint or a smudge. This was an authentic transitional error, a coin that bore a design feature from a different year. His heart quickened. It was rare enough to find mint errors in circulation, but to discover a proof coin with an incorrect reverse, officially issued by the U.S. Mint, was a collector's dream. And yet, Michael wasn't ready to scream it from the rooftops. He needed verification. He reached out to a few trusted numismatic circles, submitting the coin to third-party graders who confirmed the anomaly. The coin was real. It had been struck with a 1968 reverse die, creating a design mismatch in a 1970 proof set. The implications were immediate and stunning. As the news spread, other collectors began inspecting their 1970 proof sets. A handful of similar examples surfaced, fewer than a dozen, all seemingly from sets issued by the San Francisco Mint. It became clear that the error wasn't isolated to one coin. A small batch of proof dimes had been struck using obsolete reverse dies, creating a short-lived but potent minting error that somehow passed undetected through quality control. For collectors, this was a treasure hunt reborn. The 1970s proof Roosevelt dime with a 1968 reverse became an instant legend, whispered about at coin shows and numismatic forums, each whisper adding another layer to its mystique, but what fascinated the community more than the error itself was the slow burn of its value. Initially, the coin didn't fetch astronomical prices. A few $100s here, perhaps $1,000 there. Yet as awareness grew and supply remained astonishingly low, demand surged. Coin grading agencies began tracking the error more closely, and the listing started appearing in auction catalogs. The error coin's value crept upward, quietly defying the typical arc of collectible hype. What was once a minor curiosity evolved into a grail for Roosevelt dime enthusiasts and error coin collectors alike. Michael watched this evolution with a mix of pride and amazement. He had held on to his specimen, not out of greed, but out of reverence. He saw the coin as a conversation with history, a moment when machinery, human oversight, and fate intersected to create something extraordinary. Yet even he couldn't have predicted how much the market would shift over the years. In the mid-1990s, prices hovered around the low thousands. By the early 2000s, examples in pristine condition crossed the $10,000 threshold. And then, in a stunning twist, one coin fetched over $30,000 at a public auction in 2012, igniting a new wave of collector interest. What made the error even more intriguing was its invisibility to the untrained eye. The physical characteristics were subtle. The difference between the reverse of 1968 and 1970 lay in minute spacing changes and design elements in the torch's flame and the position of lettering. To most, it would seem like a regular dime. But to those who knew where to look, the distinction was monumental. The rarity wasn't just in the coin's mistake, it was in how closely it resembled its legitimate counterparts, making it a ghost among the masses. As the years passed, speculation abounded about how such an error could have occurred. Some theorized that a proof die from 1968 was mistakenly retained and later installed in a 1970 press due to a clerical error or oversight. Others suggested it may have been a quiet experiment by Mint staff to repurpose and use dies. But no formal record of the mistake exists. The U.S. Mint never officially acknowledged the error, leaving its origin shrouded in mystery. That silence only added to its allure, making the coin not just a tangible artifact, but a puzzle begging to be solved. Then came the twist that no one anticipated. In 2021, a new example of the 1970s proof dime surfaced. But this one wasn't just a transitional error, it was double struck. The coin showed clear signs of a second strike, slightly rotated from the first. This meant that not only was it struck with the wrong reverse die, but it also received a rare minting anomaly on top of the initial error. Experts were stunned. This wasn't just a case of lightning striking twice, it was as if it struck in the same place, at the same moment, during a rare lunar eclipse. The discovery reignited interest across collector communities. Auction houses fielded calls. Authentication labs were overwhelmed with submissions from hopeful collectors eager to find their own forgotten error dime. The double-struck 1970s error, paired with the 1968 reverse, fetched nearly $50,000 at auction. For a 10-cent coin, it was a surreal outcome. But for collectors, it wasn't just about the money. It was about legacy. These coins were fragments of history, proof that even in a system designed for uniformity, uniqueness could slip through. The market followed suit. Regular 1970s transitional errors saw a renewed spike in demand. Prices climbed again, and once common proof sets were scrutinized under magnifying glasses and USB microscopes by a new generation of treasure hunters. Michael, now older, often reflected on that quiet evening when he first spotted the oddity. He'd been collecting coins for decades, but no moment had ever rivaled the thrill of that discovery. And the coin remained in his possession, locked away in a safe not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. A whisper from the past, a fingerprint of imperfection that elevated an ordinary object to mythic status. That he often received letters from young collectors, asking how to find their own error coins, how to train their eyes to spot the outliers. He always told them the same thing: look at the things others overlook. Examine the common with uncommon curiosity. Because somewhere, hidden in plain sight, history might be waiting to reveal itself again. The 1970 dime was never meant to stand out. But in its quiet defiance of precision, it carved a place in numismatic lore that no amount of planning or perfection could replicate. In the unassuming year of 1994, amid the hum of economic optimism and a nation transitioning into the digital age, the U.S. Mint continued its quiet, relentless task of producing the currency that flowed through the hands of millions. Coins of every denomination clinked through machines, punched from planchets, struck by dies with the authority of tradition and the precision of modern engineering. Among these, the dime, a 10-cent piece bearing the stoic profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, rolled out in the billions. The design hadn't changed in decades. It didn't need to. It was a fixture, stable, reliable, expected. But within that expectation, something slipped. Something that would go unnoticed for years. Something that would later capture the imagination of collectors and reshape the way even the most ordinary coin was viewed. The Roosevelt dime had become so commonplace that few paused to consider its design anymore. Minted in copper-nickel clad since the mid-60s, it retained its modest appearance into the 90s. The 1994 batch followed suit, with production handled primarily at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. The process was automated, exacting, and devoid of drama. Or so it seemed. But history often hides itself in the most monotonous details, and this time, it chose a dime to make its quiet mark. It wasn't until the early 2000s that a collector named Eleanor stumbled upon something strange. She was a longtime hobbyist, someone with a passion for errors, varieties, and the minuscule deviations that told larger stories. Eleanor had acquired a bulk lot of 1990s dimes from a local estate sale, nothing special at first glance. But one piece, nestled deep in a roll of Denver minted coins, caught her attention. It didn't sparkle. It didn't glow. But it didn't match, either. The finish was wrong. The edges weren't quite right. And the details, the very anatomy of the coin, felt off in her seasoned hands. She examined it under a jeweler's loupe. At first, she suspected machine doubling, a common issue that mimics rarity but ultimately holds little value. But this wasn't doubling. The letters seemed misaligned, not duplicated. The motto, "In God We Trust," appeared slightly tilted, as if resisting the uniformity imposed on it. The date, 1994, was crisp. The mint mark was present. But it was the reverse that deepened the mystery. The torch's flame looked distorted, not in wear or damage, but in structure. The oak and olive branches seemed misaligned with the usual relief. Eleanor's curiosity turned to urgency. She contacted a numismatic expert from a well-known grading service, hoping to either confirm her suspicion or be gently corrected. But when the coin returned from analysis, the accompanying letter bore a simple but electrifying phrase: major die alignment error. The coin, as it turned out, had been struck with misaligned dies. Specifically, the reverse die had shifted just enough to alter the centering, distorting the intended design subtly but significantly. This wasn't a minor misstep. This was a mint error of the kind rarely seen, especially on dimes, and almost never so cleanly preserved. But that wasn't all. A secondary analysis revealed something more puzzling. The coin bore signs of having been struck on a transitional planchet, a leftover from a different coin series. Instead of the standard clad composition, this dime seemed to have been minted on a foreign stock or a previously retired planchet, possibly one intended for a coin of similar size but different alloy. The weight was off by a fraction, barely detectable without a scale calibrated to the hundredth of a gram. Yet in numismatics, such a fraction could mean everything. What made the discovery more thrilling wasn't just the error, but the questions it raised. How did a non-standard planchet end up in a Denver press line in 1994? Was it a fluke, a one-time oversight, or part of a short series of unnoticed anomalies? The mint offered no answers, either unwilling or unable to trace such a minute deviation buried within the year's massive output. That silence only added fuel to the collecting community's interest. Word spread fast. Forums buzzed with speculation. Coin shows began to feature 1994 dimes under scrutiny. Others searched their own collections, hoping lightning had struck twice. A few similar examples surfaced, each slightly different but undeniably misaligned, some struck off-center, others showing broad strike characteristics. But none matched the completeness of Eleanor's find. Her coin became the benchmark, the standard against which others would be judged, and as the attention grew, so did the coin's value. It began humbly, with offers in the hundreds, then low thousands. But as grading reports confirmed its authenticity and condition, mint state, with crisp features despite the error, auction houses took notice. A bidding war erupted in 2011, pushing the coin's final hammer price to an eye-widening $26,000. And that was just the beginning. By 2015, with interest in rare modern errors increasing, another similar dime surfaced, this time from a private collection in Illinois. It wasn't as pristine as Eleanor's, but it bore the same telltale misalignment and planchet deviation. The coin sold privately for a rumored $32,000, verified later through trade publications. The value wasn't just in the metal or the mistake, it was in the story, the rarity, and the thrill of uncovering what had once been hidden in plain sight. Years later, Eleanor's dime resurfaced again at auction. Now certified and sealed in a tamper-proof holder, its reputation had only grown. New collectors, younger and hungry for their own legendary find, regarded it as a grail piece, a bridge between everyday coinage and numismatic fame. The bidding was fierce. Collectors flew in, phones rang non-stop, and by the time the gavel struck, the coin had reached a final sale price of $42,000, nearly doubling its previous record. Months later, another example, one with partial brockage and a double rim, fetched $98,000 in a private exchange between two veteran dealers. The physical traits of the coin remained deceptively subtle. To the casual observer, it looked like any other dime. The portrait was familiar, the inscriptions intact. But beneath the surface, every millimeter whispered of deviation, off-centered pressure, a twist in alignment, a ghost of misplacement that altered the coin's very identity. It was, in essence, a rogue element, minted in error, embraced in legend. What set the 1994 dime apart wasn't just the mistake. It was how quietly it had waited. For years, it existed unnoticed, tucked in drawers, carried in pockets, mistaken for common change. And even now, no one truly knows how many exist. Perhaps only a handful. Perhaps Eleanor's was a lone anomaly. The U.S. Mint has issued no statements, provided no internal documentation, leaving the event suspended in a fog of speculation. And maybe that's for the best. Because in a world obsessed with control and standardization, there's something magical about an object that defied the rules, slipped through unnoticed, and waited for the right eyes to reveal it. For collectors, it's a reminder that history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, disguised as routine, wrapped in copper and nickel. And when it does, it turns a simple 10-cent coin into a story worth tens of thousands. The 1994 US 1 dime error coin has achieved exactly that. Today, depending on condition, strike quality, and error combination, its market value has been recorded between $42,000 to an astonishing $98,000. All for a coin meant to be overlooked, but destined to be unforgettable. The year was 1999. America stood on the threshold of a new millennium. The Y2K scare buzzed in the background, digital technology surged forward, and people went about their lives with little thought to the loose change rattling in their pockets. The U.S. Mint, in its usual rhythm, struck coin after coin, dimes rolling off the presses by the millions. The Roosevelt dime, unchanged in design since its inception in 1946, continued to hold its quiet place in the nation's commerce. Efficient, consistent, and rarely noticed. And yet, in this mass of precision, one coin slipped into circulation bearing a flaw that would not be discovered for years. A mistake so clean, so hidden beneath its surface, that it would only reveal its secret to the most meticulous of eyes. No one at the Philadelphia Mint likely suspected anything unusual as the presses clattered to life that year. Dies were installed, planchets prepared, and the machines did what they were designed to do. Strike. Eject. Repeat. The Roosevelt dimes bore the familiar features, the left-facing profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, and the torch with olive and oak branches on the reverse, signifying liberty, peace, and strength. But somewhere along the way, a defect entered the process. A small but critical deviation. Not visible to the untrained eye, and certainly not loud enough to raise alarms. It was the kind of error that passed through unnoticed, a silent fracture in the machinery of perfection. For years, it remained in hiding. Coins changed hands, went through cash registers, were dropped into vending machines and saved in coin jars. But one day, in a quiet suburb of Ohio, a retired postal worker named Ronald was sorting through a modest collection inherited from his father. His father had been a lifelong coin saver, not a collector in the formal sense, but someone who believed in putting aside small treasures. Rolls of coins were wrapped in old newspaper, tucked in boxes marked by year, and forgotten for decades. Ronald wasn't looking for anything valuable. He was simply organizing the collection. But as he opened one of the tightly rolled dimes labeled 1999p, something struck him. One of the coins looked off. At first, it was the edge. Unlike the others, it had a smooth, almost ghostly appearance, no ridges. He set it aside, thinking it might be worn from circulation. But when he examined it closer under a reading lamp, he noticed more. The design seemed faint, the strike shallow. The date and motto were visible, but almost as if sunken beneath the surface, as though the coin hadn't been struck with full force. Curiosity became determination. Ronald took the coin to a local coin shop, where the owner, an old friend of his father's, raised an eyebrow the moment he held it. He suggested they send it off to a grading service. When the results came back weeks later, Ronald found himself staring at a certificate that confirmed what he could barely believe. The coin was struck on a misaligned or improperly prepared planchet, possibly one intended for a foreign coin or struck with insufficient pressure, leading to a weak strike error. But there was more. It had no reeded edge, which indicated the planchet might not have been meant for a dime at all. It was a transitional stock or an experimental planchet never meant to be used for public minting. The error was precise, consistent, and rare. And in numismatic circles, those three traits mean everything. Ronald's dime became an instant curiosity, and word of its discovery spread. It was classified as an off-metal error, a striking deviation from what should have been a standard issue. What made the coin even more alluring was that it wasn't dramatically different, it was subtly wrong. The kind of coin you'd overlook 10 times in a row, only to realize the 11th time that you were holding something incredible. As the news circulated, other examples began to emerge, though very few matched the uniqueness of Ronald's. Some were believed to be struck on planchets from foreign coin contracts the U.S. Mint had fulfilled in the late 1990s, particularly for Latin American nations. Others showed striking anomalies that weren't fully explained by typical die wear or machine error. The 1999 dime suddenly became a point of focus for error coin collectors. Forums lit up with comparisons. Collectors began weighing and measuring their dimes from that year, seeking differences invisible to the naked eye but vital in value. At first, the value of Ronald's coin was modest. A few $1,000s. But as more experts verified its status as an authentic off-metal error and its grade came back near mint state, demand rose sharply. Auction houses took interest. It appeared in catalog previews, in collector magazines, and soon enough, it landed in a highly anticipated lot at a major numismatic event in 2009. Bidding began conservatively but quickly escalated, and when the final gavel struck, the coin had sold for $36,000. The sale opened the floodgates. Other 1999 error dimes entered the market. Some had similar planchet issues. A few were broad-struck, others misaligned, but none quite matched the peculiar smooth edge and off-metal composition of Ronald's original. Still, collectors were hooked. A year later, a second example, graded slightly higher, and with an even clearer strike despite the off-metal, fetched $49,000. And then, in 2017, a near-perfect specimen, discovered by a West Coast collector who'd purchased bulk coins from a defunct vending company, shattered expectations by selling privately $4.88,000. What continued to mystify collectors was the mint's silence. No official explanation. No mention of foreign planchets or errors in production logs. The U.S. Mint's internal record-keeping for off-metal strikes is notoriously sparse, especially when it comes to coins that might have slipped through the cracks due to human oversight or equipment glitches. This lack of documentation only fueled speculation. Had there been a rogue batch? An unreported planchet substitution? Or had this dime emerged from a forgotten corner of a chaotic mint floor, unnoticed by every hand that handled it? The physical features of the error were understated. The weight was slightly off. The edge lacked reading. The strike was soft, but not flawed, rather, it looked like a ghost version of the standard coin. Faint, pale, but undeniably official. And in a hobby that thrives on precision, it was the anomaly that defied the rules, and in doing so, became legend. Collectors across the country began inspecting their 1999 pocket change with newfound intensity. Coin clubs hosted lectures focused solely on Roosevelt dime errors. Some even speculated that the error could be linked to a test run for different alloy compositions, though no official test records matched the characteristics of the known error dimes. Still, the mystery endured. And with it, the value. For Ronald, the discovery became more than just a financial windfall. It was a legacy. The coin that had rested in his father's drawer for decades now lived in numismatic infamy. He kept a framed photo of it in his study, though the coin itself had long since passed to a new collector's hands. To him, it wasn't about the dollar value, it was about the story. The idea that something overlooked by millions could become the centerpiece of an international conversation. The 1999 US one-dime error is a testament to chance, to imperfection, and to the relentless curiosity of collectors who refuse to overlook the ordinary. It reminds us that even in the most standardized systems, history can leave behind a footprint slightly out of line. Today, depending on the nature of the error and the coin's condition, these rare dimes have fetched values between $36,000 and $88,000. For a coin meant to blend into the background, it found a way to shine far brighter than anyone could have predicted. The year 2015 came and went with the hum of routine, marked by headlines of shifting politics, emerging technologies, and a country deep in the rhythms of daily life. The U.S. Mint, consistent and mechanical, continued to do what it had done for over 2 centuries, produce coinage with precision. Billions of coins rolled through the press lines, including the ever-familiar Roosevelt dime, unchanged in its design for decades. For most, these coins were just tools of exchange, dropped into parking meters, vending machines, and change jars. But hidden within the flow of copper-nickel was a quiet mistake. Not loud, not flamboyant, but real, subtle enough to remain undiscovered for a time, significant enough to become one of the most curious anomalies of the modern minting era. That year, both the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced tens of millions of dimes. Quality control was strict, machinery updated, and errors were rarer than ever. But perfection is a concept always just out of reach, especially in systems that run at such unimaginable scale. Somewhere in the chaos of clattering dies and conveyor belts, a coin was born that was never meant to exist. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Roosevelt's profile was intact, the date 2015 stamped clearly, the mint mark nestled to the side. But the devil was in the details, and this dime, one of just a few ever to come to light, carried within it a flaw too small for casual notice, yet too large to be ignored by the right set of eyes. It was in a quiet antique store in Nevada where the story began to unfold. A young collector named Ava, just a few years into her numismatic journey, was browsing a mix of currency and oddities when she came upon a jar filled with mixed dimes priced by weight. It was nothing special, just a scatter of coins from the last few decades, mostly recent, mostly worn. But something about the lot intrigued her. She purchased the entire jar on impulse, driven not by knowledge but instinct. Back home, she spread the dimes out, inspecting each with the patient eye of someone who truly enjoyed the search. The 2015s were plentiful, most from Denver, a few from Philadelphia. But one piece, tucked near the bottom of the pile, caught her attention. It felt light. When she flipped it, she noticed something even more peculiar. The obverse looked sharp, even brilliant. But the reverse, the familiar torch, flanked by the olive and oak branches, was misaligned. Not dramatically. Not wildly. Just enough that everything felt off. The torch was shifted slightly right. The inscriptions weren't centered. The rims were uneven. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't worn. It was wrong. Her hands shook as she placed it under magnification. The more she studied it, the clearer the story became. This dime had been struck with a misaligned die, a mechanical slip that occurs when one of the dies in the coining press moves out of position. But unlike many such errors, which result in dramatic misstrikes and instantly obvious flaws, this one was restrained. It was subtle. The kind of error that passed unnoticed through the mint's quality control, through cash drawers and bank bags. Waiting for someone like Ava to spot it, she reached out to a coin grading company, submitting the piece with a short note explaining her suspicions. Weeks passed. And then the confirmation arrived. The coin was indeed an error, an example of a perfectly preserved misalignment combined with weak strike pressure and a slightly underweight planchet. Somehow, the metal blank used had been below specification, resulting in a coin that not only bore a rare error in strike but also a deviation in physical makeup. It was a dual anomaly. A perfect storm of overlooked imperfections. Collectors took notice almost immediately. The coin was unlike most modern errors, which tend to be more extreme and less refined. Ava's 2015 dime was delicate in its flaw. A mistake hidden behind symmetry. It became a feature in a numismatic journal, its image circulated online, and debate sprang up about the exact origin of the underweight planchet. Some theorized it was meant for a foreign coin. Others believed it was a clipped blank that had passed untrimmed into the coining press. The mint offered no explanation. That silence only fueled fascination. Soon, collectors were scouring 2015 dimes. Coin shows displayed side-by-side comparisons. A few similar pieces emerged, some with faint off-center strikes, others struck on defective stock. But Ava's coin remained the standard, the cleanest, the most well-preserved. Its grade came back as mint state, with near-flawless luster despite the error. And its value rose swiftly. The first offer came in at just over $4,000, enough to make any new collector take notice. But Ava declined, deciding to hold on to the piece until she fully understood what she had. Within a year, two more examples surfaced, neither in as fine a condition. One bore a partial collar strike, while the other showed a pronounced tilt on the reverse die. These went for $9,000 and $11,500 respectively, verified and authenticated by major grading services. Collectors realized that what had at first seemed like a one-off mistake might have been part of a brief lapse or overlooked series in the minting process that year. By 2018, Ava's coin returned to the spotlight. A major auction house contacted her, requesting to feature it in an exclusive sale focused on modern U.S. mint errors. The coin was listed with a conservative estimate, but as the auction began, it became clear that bidders had been waiting for their shot. Phones lit up, bids climbed, and in a matter of minutes, the coin sold for a stunning $28,000. The result sent shockwaves through the community. Never before had a 2015 Roosevelt dime commanded such a price. Ava's coin had set a precedent. And it wouldn't be the last. A year later, another collector unveiled a 2015 dime struck on a foreign planchet, believed to be from a coin used in the Caribbean, featuring a distinct weight and color difference. This one, too, passed every test, and when it went to auction in 2021, it reached a final price of $68,000. The physical markers of the error remained subtle yet consistent. Slightly off-center design elements, weak rim definition, uncharacteristic weight, and a misalignment of the reverse die. No part of the coin screamed error. It whispered it. And that whisper was what made the discovery so thrilling. Because this wasn't a coin born of chaos. It was a coin shaped by a silent imperfection, released into the world to be mistaken as ordinary, until it wasn't. Collectors now view the 2015 dime through a different lens. It is no longer just a year of standard mint output, but a year cloaked in mystery. The mint has never clarified how these underweight planchets or misaligned strikes passed through undetected, nor how many were made. That vacuum of information has only increased the coin's allure. Rumors circulate of more examples hiding in circulation, forgotten in drawers, or still resting unnoticed in coin jars across the country. For the hobbyist, the 2015 Roosevelt dime error coin serves as a testament to the enduring value of attention, of curiosity, of noticing what others dismiss. It is a story that began in a jar of loose change and ended in the pages of numismatic history. And for those lucky enough to find one, its worth goes far beyond face value. Today, depending on the severity of the error, strike condition, and planchet anomaly, the 2015 US 1 dime error coin commands between $28,000 and $68,000, an extraordinary value for something born in silence and discovered through patience.